As darkness descended over the quaint neighborhood, the usual symphony of crickets and rustling leaves was replaced by an unnerving hush. It was the kind of quiet that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, a pregnant silence that amplified the faintest of sounds. And that's exactly when she heard it, a whisper slithering into her awareness, barely audible, yet chillingly distinct. Her name was Clare. She was an ordinary woman. At least she thought she was until that night, that fateful night when she first heard the whispers. Now, Clare prided herself on her rationality. Ghosts, spirits, things that go bump in the night, they were all dismissed as mere figments of an overactive imagination. But this was different. This was tangible, a presence that seemed to seep into her very bones. At first, it was just a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible. She brushed it off, assuming it was the wind. But then it began to speak directly to her, slithering into her consciousness like a venomous snake. Do you ever wonder what would happen if you could hear the thoughts of the people around you? Imagine that voice, crawling into your mind, telling you to do things you never would have thought of yourself. You can't stop it. You can't escape it. You just listen and obey. Now, those initial moments when the whisper first made itself known were the ones that tormented Clare the most. It was a whisper, yet it resonated with the familiarity of a half-forgotten dream. It sounded like her name being called in the distance, beckoning her towards a danger she couldn't quite comprehend. But she couldn't place it, couldn't identify the source. So she did what any logical person would do. She tried to rationalize it away. She told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, the byproduct of too many ghost stories and late-night horror movies. But the whispers didn't cease. They continued, growing bolder, more persistent. In fact, they seemed to be getting closer, inching their way into her sanity. And that's when she knew she had to do something, because Clare was not the type to surrender her life to the whims of her imagination. She was a fighter. And even though the enemy was something she couldn't see, touch, or understand, she refused to back down. Clare decided she needed answers. So she started with the basics. She checked her windows, ensuring they were firmly locked. She scrutinized her walls, searching for cracks or gaps that could explain the strange noises. She even went so far as to consult with a local handyman, a gruff, salt-of-the-earth kind of guy named Hank, who listened patiently to her tale and gave her a knowing nod. Old houses, he told her, creak and moan. They have a language of their own. But Clare wasn't convinced. Yet she had reached a point where she had to consider all possibilities. So she agreed to let Hank check out the house. To her relief, he found nothing out of the ordinary. A loose pipe, a settling board, a mouse in the wall. He had an explanation for everything except the whispers. As Hank packed up his tools, he gave Clare a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Sometimes, he said, the best thing to do is just ignore it. Let it run its course. Whatever it is, it'll pass. But Clare couldn't do that. The whispers had become a part of her life, a malevolent presence that followed her everywhere, whispering insidious things just below the threshold of hearing. And then it hit her. She was spending too much time in her head, overthinking everything. All she needed was a change of pace, a distraction. So she reached out to her friends, inviting them over for a game night. Laughter echoed through her home that evening as she and her friends rolled dice and moved pieces across the game board. For a few precious hours, the whispers receded into the background, drowned out by the warmth of friendship and the comfort of familiarity. But as soon as they left, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. Clare realized she couldn't outrun them. She had to confront them. But how do you fight an enemy that you can't see, touch, or understand? You find common ground. Clare knew that whatever was whispering in her head was intelligent, aware, maybe even sentient. So she decided to engage, to try and communicate with whatever was out there. She began by talking to herself, not about mundane things like the weather or her job, but about her fears, her doubts, her vulnerabilities. And then something remarkable happened. The whispers responded. They weaved themselves into her conversations, adding their own insidious commentary, their own sinister suggestions. It was like a twisted game of 20 questions, a macabre game of hide-and-seek, and Claire found herself both terrified and exhilarated. Days turned into weeks, and Claire's interactions with the whispers became more intense. She talked, they whispered. She asked questions, they offered cryptic answers. Slowly, she started to piece together the puzzle to understand the nature of the whispers. They were memories, fragmented, distorted, yet undeniably real. Memories of a life lived, a story untold. But whose memories were they? And why were they whispering to her? The answer came in the most unexpected way, in a casual comment from her neighbor, a spry, silver-haired woman named Mrs. Willowbrook. Claire had always found her neighbor peculiar, with her wistful eyes and her penchant for cryptic sayings. But now she listened intently to every word. One afternoon, while sipping lemonade on Mrs. Willoughby's porch, Claire casually mentioned the whispers, not expecting much from the conversation. But Mrs. Willoughby's response took her breath away. "Ah, the whispers," Mrs. Willoughby sighed dreamily. "They've been calling you, haven't they? Trying to tell you things?" Before Claire could respond, Mrs. Willoughby stood abruptly, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Come with me," she said, taking Claire's hand and leading her into her house. Inside, amidst the clutter of knickknacks and antique furniture, Mrs. Willoughby led Claire to a hidden alcove behind a tapestry. There, nestled in the dim light, sat an old trunk bound in leather. "Open it," Mrs. Willoughby whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. As Claire lifted the heavy lid, a musty smell wafted out, mingling with the scent of lavender and old paper. Inside, she found a stack of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon and an old photograph. The photograph showed a young woman with kind eyes and a sad smile standing in front of a house that looked eerily familiar. On the back, Claire found the name Clara Peterson, along with the date 1947. As she carefully read through the letters, Claire felt a chill run down her spine. They were love letters, filled with longing and loss, written by a soldier named Thomas to his sweetheart, Clara. But there was something else in the letters, something that made Claire's blood run cold. They contained whispers, secrets shared only between the writer and his deceased wife. Secrets that only someone who knew Clara intimately could possess. Suddenly, everything made sense. The whispers weren't hers. They belonged to Clara, trapped in the house, reaching out from beyond the grave. Claire felt a surge of sympathy for the woman in the photograph. She, too, had loved this house, these grounds, and now she was stuck here, unable to move on. But why was she reaching out to Claire? And why were the whispers growing louder? Claire sat down heavily on the nearby couch, her mind racing. She finally understood the connection she felt to Clara. This house wasn't just any house. It was a conduit, a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And somehow Clara had chosen Claire to help her. But how? Claire stood up abruptly, a new sense of purpose filling her. She knew what she had to do. She needed to help Clara find peace. But how does one do that when the only connection to the living world is a set of cryptic whispers? Claire started with the basics. She cleaned the house, dusted the furniture, tended to the overgrown garden. It was hard work, both physically and emotionally, but Claire was driven by a sense of duty and an insatiable curiosity. As she worked, she listened to the whispers, piecing together the fragments of Clara's story. Slowly, she started to understand the woman behind the whispers, her joys, her sorrows, her loves, her losses. And in doing so, she felt a profound connection grow between them. One day, while exploring the attic, Claire stumbled upon a box filled with Clara's belongings, a wedding dress, a diary, and a collection of sheet music. As Claire delved deeper into Clara's past, she uncovered a story of unfulfilled dreams and a love that transcended death. Clara had been engaged to a soldier who had died in World War II. Unable to bear the pain of losing him, she had taken her own life. Clare felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She understood now why Clara was trapped, why she needed Clare's help. She was stuck in a state of limbo, torn between the worlds of the living and the dead, unable to move on. Clare knew what she had to do. She needed to help Clara find peace, to break the cycle of despair that had kept her tethered to this world for so long. With newfound determination, Clare began performing rituals based on the customs of the time period in which Clara had lived. She put on the wedding dress, sang songs from the era, and even played music from Clara's sheet music collection. Each day, Clare felt a deep sense of connection with Clara, as if their souls were intertwining, bridging the gap between their two lives. And then one day, something remarkable happened. The whispers stopped. They were replaced by a profound silence that enveloped the house, broken only by the sound of birds chirping outside. At first, Clare was startled by the sudden quiet. She missed the whispers, the connection they had given her to Clara. But as the silence stretched on, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. It was the kind of peace that comes after a long, arduous journey, a peace that signals the arrival of something new, something better. In the weeks that followed, Clare noticed changes in herself and in the house. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the house since she had arrived seemed to lift, replaced by a lightness that allowed sunshine to stream through the windows and flowers to bloom in the garden. Clare felt as though she had shed a weight that she had been carrying without even realizing it. The whispers were gone, but their absence did not bring emptiness. It brought clarity, peace, and a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led her there. Looking back, Clare realized that the whispers had been a blessing in disguise, a catalyst that had led her to discover a strength she never knew she possessed, and a connection to a woman who had lived, loved, and died within these very walls. The house was no longer just a house. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead had blurred, allowing two souls separated by time to find solace and connection in each other.